Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Sko Show, your Colorado Buffaloes podcast from your friends here at Miley Sports. Sean, Peyton, not that one, that's the Broncos, but we'll talk about the Buffaloes, of course. Sean Drotar, Peyton Kraft with you. Have a couple things to hit on today. Of course, the Buffs only a few weeks away from the season opener up in Boulder, a primetime matchup, pun kind of intended, with the Georgia Tech matchup there. That's obviously a big one. Maybe a little revenge for the split championship of 1990. Maybe that's just the me talking. I was there during that span of time. I'm still a little frustrated by it. So I know I want that game, but the Buffs have a lot of work to do. The over-under in Vegas, and it's not the be-all, end-all, Peyton, is the idea that the Buffs have a 6.5, expect to win, roughly 6 or 7 games, assuming a big drop-off after the departure of Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, and many others to the NFL. But at the same time, they've brought in a lot of talent. We know about Julian Lewis, of course, the top high school quarterback in the country. Caden Salter, who is tied with Gabe Klubnik of Clemson with 66 combined touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. That's the most in college football. We'll worry about that at another time. But we do want to look at what's coming back for the Buffs and then what's coming in the transfer portal. And so let's start with some of the good news. Friend of the program, DJ McKinney, of course, into the preseason first team all Big 12. That's to be expected. McKinney expected to make a big leap forward. Obviously, he was one of the most impactful players on defense. And in college football, obviously, the passing game is a huge part of it. And so some familiarity is valuable. Having McKinney back is valuable, but maybe even more than that, when you talk about all the turnover in college football, the defensive backfield isn't one of those situations on the Buffs.
Yeah, and you can't say the same for the offensive line, but for our defense, we'll get into that. But for our defense, you do have some returning players, and having DJ McKinney back, he played the most, he led the team in defensive snaps. He's a great guy to have back for this team, especially, Travis Hunter is now gone. He played both sides of the ball. So getting DJ back is a huge win for us.
Yeah, you don't replace Travis Hunter defensively, obviously, but it might be for the Buffaloes, quite frankly, replacing him at receiver might actually be even a little harder than replacing him in the backfield. There will be returners opposite of McKinney. RJ Johnson is back. Carter Stoutmire is back at safety. Preston Hodge, presumably in that nickel back role. Tafik Bayard, the transfer, expected to take over as a starter up at the black and gold game in the spring. Bayard was one of the guys that really stood out. A lot of standouts on defense coming in. Martavius French, the linebacker, one of those as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those transfer portal guys as we move along. But for the defense, getting McKinney back, obviously a big part of it. NFL prospect, obviously, you're talking about a first team in one of the Power 4 conferences for McKinney, but it does feel as if there's going to be a shift. McKinney was able to more or less be off of the number 2 wide receiver as teams matched up with Travis Hunter for the most part. Now McKinney, in many ways, he's the guy that's really replacing Hunter. The question is for the Buffs, who's replacing McKinney? Because McKinney has to level up here. You have to now take on the best of the best, and he may very well travel from side to side depending on the alignments.
Yeah, he did have a great year last year, even though Travis Hunter was your number 1. He had 3 interceptions, 9 pass breakups. He started all games, so injury wasn't an issue for him during the season. So he does have to improve a little bit to get that number 1 role, but we'll see who kind of takes his position heading into the season.
McKinney looks ready for it. One of the strengths for this Buffaloes team as the season gets ready to go. Another one, we'll turn our attention to the offense, of course, the former top prospect in high school among offensive linemen, Jordan Seaton. What's in the bag, Seaton? When we're talking about Jordan Seaton, we're talking about a guy now that there's all Big 12 and then there's All-American. Jordan Seaton now preseason All-American on the second team and an Outland Watch list as well for best lineman in the country. So with Seaton, you're talking about one of the big guys. And it's easy to forget when he came to Colorado, not only was it a big move, but people tend to forget he turned down larger NIL offers from other schools to come to Colorado and protect Shedeur Sanders' blindside. Now, a very different role. You have Caden Salter, you have Julian Lewis, both guys that move. Salter, a true dual threat guy. Blocking for him is a totally different scenario than blocking for a guy that is more of a pocket passer in Shedeur Sanders' case. Seaton seems to be up to it. There doesn't seem to be a lot that he can't do, but you're talking about a young guy now that's expected to anchor the offensive line and be one of, as a sophomore, one of the wily vets
Right.
on this offense. It is a lot to pile on the guy, despite the very large shoulders.
Right. And it does feel as if they're almost rebuilding that offensive line around Jordan Seaton. I mean, he was freshman All-American. Now he's preseason. Again, you said the Outland watch list. You are rebuilding that offensive line off of him because he is an amazing player, but he does have to step into that role of being that veteran, kind of leading that team with a new quarterback.
Yeah, and a totally new blocking scheme.
Mhm.
Obviously, even Julian Lewis runs more than Sugar Sanders, who ran only when he needed to. Not a guy that you wanted him running. Obviously, he would roll out, be mobile in the pocket, and move around. But there's no way anyone describes Sugar Sanders as a running quarterback.
No.
That's not what he is. Lewis certainly moves better. The younger guys are obviously a little more dual threat in general, but Caden Salter is a flat out runner that can throw.
Yeah.
This is the guy that's out there. We talked about it in the last podcast last week. The idea that the Buffs running game would primarily improve some of the returning guys like Dallin Hayden and Michael Welch, but a lot of it's going to come from Salter, which means that even though you're blocking for the quarterback, you are also blocking in the running game simultaneously. That's a lot. It's a big change. It is a lot to ask of not only Seaton, but the new guys coming in as well.
Right. Yeah. And not only is he protecting now a runner quarterback, hopefully, like we talked about last time, that the running game improves, right? So he's going to be in charge. We're going to talk about some transfers CU got, but that left side should look pretty good to get that running game going again and then protect the quarterback.
Yeah, it has to happen. When you figure about the strength of this team now, I think it's probably fair to say that this version of the Buffs, the defense might be a little bit stronger than the offense until we know and see it better. And so one of the things you want to do is you want to run the football, not only because you get to dictate what you're doing offensively. The better you run, the more you open play action, the more the pitch game can occur. A lot of things can happen once you prove it to a team you can run the football. But the other part of this that's interesting that is if you can run, which the Buffaloes, as we described, could not. You control the pace. You reduce the number of possessions that the other team
Waste
has.
the clock a little
and so
bit.
when you're reducing the possessions, you're putting pressure on them, even in manners you're not thinking. When when an opposing offense realizes maybe we're not going to get 12 to 14 drives in this game. Maybe it's going to only be 8 to 10. The pressure for them to score touchdowns on that continues to build, even when the running game isn't necessarily netting you points. Shortening the game when your offense is still part of the question is really valuable. So the run game for the Buffs is a lot. The passing game, we know they need to protect as well. But we also want to spend a little time talking about some of the transfers that have come in. Obviously, for the Buffaloes, the transfers have been a thing since Deion Sanders came in. Other coaches got chased flat out of the coaching community, deciding I'm not going to deal with this. What Deion's doing is not sustainable. Well, we'll find out because every single team is doing it. That is college football now. Every team is reinventing themselves on the fly year to year. Coach Prime was just ahead of the curve. But when we look at the transfer portal players that are expected to be impactful right off the bat, we talked about this offense, and Peyton, you took a look at some of those along the offensive line because they are expected to get instant starters out of that portal.
Right. Yeah. And we talked about Jordan Seaton, kind of they're rebuilding that offensive line around him. And Xavier Hill from Memphis, he's going to be a transfer, 1 year of eligibility. And you'll find out a lot of these guys do just have that 1 year left. It's kind of where college football is going. But Xavier Hill is one of those guys that can help this offensive line. He was ranked number 4 overall in ESPN's spring transfer portal list. 6'5", 315. This is a big guy.
These guys are
massive.
They're almost bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, I as we record this, I spent this morning out at Dove Valley at the Denver Broncos training camp, and I mean, you're talking about college kids that are as big or bigger than their NFL counterparts, which is absolutely bonkers. But that's what you're talking about. And so some of these guys coming to the Buffaloes with the opportunity to get as many eyes on them as possible. Obviously, Coach Prime and the Buffs attract attention. The only team in college football last year to have every one of their games nationally televised. So it's an opportunity to get those NFL scouts, get a look at you, and then move forward to your career. But for the Buffaloes, this is still a good plan because you bring these guys in, they're high level, like you said, 4th in the transfer portal rankings. So you get a guy that can come in and start immediately for you, but he's not the only one when you're talking about this offensive line that's going to be impactful.
Right. Yeah. Again, you have a lot of transfers coming in. Another one that transfer in from Northwestern, you have Cooper Lovelace.
Little Big Ten power football. Right? I like that.
He played for USC, went to Northwestern. Again, these transfers, they just go from school to school.
Bounce around.
Also another year of eligibility left, but his versatility. He can play he's played both guard and tackle. He's just good for depth for CU. And that's kind of a word you're going to hear with this offensive line is depth. That's what you need.
Something they have yet to have,
Yeah,
quite
haven't
frankly.
had.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to be a pretty key transfer. Just a very crucial rotational piece for them.
Yeah, when you're talking about, especially, the potential for injuries happen. You have the ability to start at a couple different places, and there is going to be, some maneuvering of this. Zy Chrysler part of this as well, another transfer that may step in and start, but Zary McGill, another one who may even step in and start as well. And then you highlighted when you talk about Lovelace, now you have backups at tackle, you have backups at guard, you have a lot of transfers. But the concern coming in for teams and for the Buffs in particular, and this is where we want to zoom out a little bit, because I get it. You're talking about maybe 3 and who knows, 3 and maybe 4 new starters on the offensive line, 3 of them and maybe 4 of them even transfer portal guys. The offensive line, you talk to anybody who plays offensive line, I don't care if it's pros, I don't care if it's college, I don't care if it's high school. The one thing they like is consistency, reps. So, just think about the concept of offensive line, right? So offensive line, when you're run blocking, you're moving forward. When you're pass blocking, you're moving backwards. That's where your first step is. But by and large, you don't have the opportunity to check and see if the person to your right or to your left is where they're supposed to be. You just have to trust that they're where they're supposed to be. And that confidence comes from familiarity. It comes from repetition. The Buffs aren't going to have that. And that is reason for concern. At the same time, welcome to college football in 2025.
At the same time,
every program is dealing with this. So, for the Buffs now, the idea is, you have some different coaching on the offensive line. You have different coaching of Marshall Faulk working with running backs. The hope is that you can coach these guys up and that maybe their experience at other big schools that we discussed helps them at least, kind of gel faster than usual.
Right. And it kind of helps, having also a new quarterback. While some people might say, well, you don't have Shedeur anymore. All these guys are coming together. They're all new. So you don't have the kind of clicky, already formed
that's a great
relationship.
Point.
So it might kind of help see you in a way that it's a completely new offensive line. You have a new quarterback, and hopefully those relationships click when the first game is around.
That's a great observation, because obviously last year with Shedeur Sanders, his second with the Buffaloes, there was obviously a lot of turnover in the offensive line there as well. But there was also the idea that this is what we do. They're new. This is what we do. We do what Shedeur is running. We put it together, and you have to jump in and fit it. Now, that's what any player has to deal with, obviously. But at the same time, you're exactly right. Hey, we're not running last year's offense because we don't have Shedeur Sanders. We don't have a quarterback with that accuracy. We have a quarterback with more mobility to take advantage of what Salter does. He's going to get first crack at it. You're going to have to change the way the blocking. So you're right. Not only are you not coming in necessarily behind, because things are going to change dramatically on the offense, but you're also right too, because in the end, you're talking about 18, 19, 20, in some cases, I guess, up to 23-year-old, really, boys in some way. And I don't mean that in any sort of derogative fashion. I was one of those too. And we can be inconsistent at that age. Let's put it that way. So when you don't have to deal with sort of that click when everyone's the new guy, including both of your quarterbacks in Salter and Lewis, it does kind of have a bunker mentality. Us against the world. Let's figure it out together. And that may end up accelerating that process. So that's a good part of it as well. And a really good point about how this is going to shake out. But for the Buffs this year offensively, that has to come together quickly, but the depth really does matter, because we saw during the season times where starters even got substituted when they were trying to figure out how to better block. And then
what happens?
Yeah, who knows? It went game to game. That's something I'd like to see change. I would love to see in the early going, if not by week 1 against Georgia Tech, I would like to see this team say, hey, you know what? We have figured out who our starters are. And if they have a subpar game, we're still going with our starters. That has been a challenge for the Buffs in the last 2 years, where, one bad game, even you're starting a new guy, but that doesn't help the consistency. You do want to, I think, see 5 guys take those jobs. Then it falls on the coaching staff. You have to stick with them. And if they have a bad game, you have to coach them up, because just yanking the guys in and out of the roster isn't going to help.
Yeah. I remember highlighting everyone on the roster who's played this game, and you just go through the whole list because they just didn't have that core piece. So hopefully this year, again, it falls on the coaches that they have. And if injuries happen, we know injuries happen.
That's a different thing.
Right. But you want to have that starting core.
Yeah, so hopefully the Buffaloes will be able to do that. You have to microwave that kind of chemistry, but then again, that's what everybody's dealing with. So in that regard, the Buffs kind of are no longer behind the eight
No.
ball like they were a couple years ago doing this.
Right.
Bringing in 50 plus transfers. They were kind of the only team doing it, and
Mhm.
so they were trying to make this happen with the other teams having consistency. But now you have guys leaving big programs,
Yeah.
and then they move along and they change something, and so everybody's doing this. As weird as it sounds, it's actually advantage
To the
Buffs.
smaller, it's advantage. I want to say smaller teams, but it's an advantage to, the Ohio States, the Georgia. They have guys transferring out
Sure.
too. So you are kind of more on an even playing field now with all the transfers happening.
Yeah. When you look at the size of these guys coming in, you talked about it, and we know about Jordan Seaton as well. There is the idea that the Buffs could hopefully generate some sort of a power run game.
Mhm.
But we don't know if that's going to be the case. We haven't seen it. That's one of the mysteries coming up for this season. Pat Shurmur as the offensive coordinator. We kind of know who Pat Shurmur is over the course of his career in college and the pros, but we haven't really seen him run this kind of offense because obviously in the pros, you're not doing a lot of this.
No.
Even Lamar Jackson isn't, pitching everything left and right.
Right.
So this is one of the great mysteries for the Buffs on offense that I'm actually really intrigued about. And I think it's one of the reasons that there is so much uncertainty in what the Buffalo's forecast looks like this year. If this doesn't work pretty early on, you find yourself behind the eight ball, and it's going to be hard to make up in the Big 12.
Yeah, and like we were talking, I think for this team, they need to come off with a quick, fast start with that confidence level in those first few games, and then we can kind of see where this can go. But it is just a big question mark. We can talk all we want right now, who's coming in, who left, but at the end of the day, we don't really know. We haven't seen what this team can do. It's a brand new team. So I'm
and it's a combination, I suspect, of, people that are nervous, but also pretty excited to see it. It will be fun to watch this expected to be rather more dynamic and wide open offense that hopefully can do more things to keep them into games. Well, you talked about players that are transferring out of big schools. Well, they got another one. One of the transfer portal players I want to look at is right in the middle of the defensive line. And by the way, immediate impact, at least the black and gold game, it's scrimmage. It is what it is. But the Buffaloes need to be able to get consistent pressure on the quarterback. They need to be better against the run than they were last year. Too many times in third and short, or even, third and three, teams could run right up the gut on the bus and get first downs. That can't happen. We'll enter Jaheim Otis, a player who, when he was in high school, came out as the number 4 defensive lineman in the country, plays defensive tackle right in the middle. And if you're talking about, does he have any experience? How's Alabama? Played for Nick Saban in his final year, played for Kalen DeBoer in DeBoer's first, and things changed. Under Saban, Otis played 12 games as a freshman. That does not happen often because we know about the talent at Bama, and even freshmen at Bama, I don't care where you rank, you don't always get to start. That's just not how it works because they get to recruit the creme de la creme. But he played 12 games under DeBoer, though. Some of the things changed. Only played 4 games, and that's when Otis decided to go ahead and hit the transfer portal. Now he lands at Colorado, the kind of player that if he was being recruited out of college, we'd be talking about him maybe not quite like Juju Lewis, but not that far off. I mean, when you're talking about that kind of position, the guy manning the middle changes everything for this defense. Otis can be an absolute game-changing talent, even though he may not rack up the stats at nose tackle.
Right. Yeah. And, we talked about offensive line, but defense, last year we saw it was that 3rd and 3. Teams just ran right up the middle. You couldn't stop those short. And to be able to have someone from Alabama definitely will help kind of, again, slow the game down. You want to have the ball as long as you can. If we can get our run game and then you can get the team off as fast as possible, that's how you win games, and that's what we're hoping to see.
Yeah, in that regard, it's not necessarily this high-flying sort of concept. It's a little more traditional. The Buffs want to hopefully play, a physical, aggressive defense. You'd like to generate turnovers in the back end with a more experienced secondary, obviously. So that's advantageous. And then if you can get a little more pressure on the quarterback, and Otis can do that. Got a couple sacks even last year with Bama, even only playing in the 4 games. So he can get that penetration in the middle. And for every quarterback, keep in mind that any quarterback at any level, you get excited about the edge rushers coming around, right? And that's the highlight reel. Guy comes all the way around, sacks the quarterback. It's great. But quarterbacks are kind of already taught to feel the pressure on the outside, to catch it your peripheral vision and get rid of it. Pressure that messes up quarterbacks. And you don't ask me about it. Ask Peyton Manning, ask Tom Brady, guys who have talked about this. The pressure that you hate is the immediate pressure right up the middle, because that obviously makes you have to step in a direction you weren't planning to step. And you got a 6'3", 300-pound guy
arms up,
putting his arms up, and all of a sudden you've just lost sight of the field. So even though that's nothing that gets tracked in the stats, it's really impactful, and it can lead to turnovers in the passing game, and also maybe even the simplest job when you're the man in the middle.
Right.
Stop the interior run from getting through. Samuel Okunlola has looked good. Amari McNeil has looked good. There's still, I think, depth concerns a little bit on that line. Of the Tafik Thomas looked good as well, but that's one of the spots where I don't think the Buffs maybe have as much talent as they'd like. So Otis is one of those guys that you're gonna have to that we're gonna pay attention to this year. If he can be impactful, he's gonna raise all boats, because if you can imagine, obviously, if the defensive line's putting on pressure, linebacker's job gets easier. Linebacker's job's easier. Defensive back's easier. And guess what? That's how you win football games. So for the Buffaloes, the new era will start in just a couple of weeks, obviously, when they take on Georgia Tech. Peyton, of course, you have things going in the hopper too. It's a good opportunity to tell people about what else you're doing here over at Mile High Sports. And
I mean,
otherwise,
I've been with Sean at Broncos training camp that ended today just for a little bit. They're heading to San Francisco.
Thankful break.
Just a little bit of a break. And then I've been with the Buffs for 4 years, 5 years, been doing a podcast of my own, Peyton's Playbook. So
check that out.
Check that out on YouTube. But I've just been kind of interviewing fans. If I'm ever at a game, come say hi. Maybe we'll get in a little interview. But just following the Buffs before Coach Prime and now after, which has been a crazy dramatic
what a phenomenal ride it's been, and this will be fascinating. Deion Sanders with the health scare, but everything looks pretty good at this point, and the Buffs will get at it in just a handful of weeks. That Friday night primetime game against Georgia Tech will kick it off for the Buffaloes, and we'll take you up to that as well. I want to thank our terrific sponsors at Peckish for everything that they do to make sure that this program gets on the air for you. 2 different locations. They have it over at Bellevue Station in the DTC, and then of course up in Boulder, the new location opening up in just a little bit here. It will be ready for the season to get going, 3 times the size of the original, and you know how good the original was. New menu coming, new pizzas, whole bunch of new things happening up there at Peckish. So make sure you check out both locations. I know I've had just about all of the sauces there. Didn't try the crazy ghost pepper one. No. I'm not quite that bold, but everything else, and it's terrific, tremendous. Everything you expect from Peckish. Make sure you go check it out. They're the reason we get to bring this to you. So we're excited to do that today, and we're excited to do it next time. So until next time, that's Peyton Kraft. I'm Sean Drotar. Thanks for watching the Sko Show. And as always, Go Buffs!